I just wanted to say that, you know, it's a slice of life, right? In this world that came together and right, all these things happening. And with the passage of time, what you get, we talked about this earlier a little bit, what you get is the beginning of healing. People are healing at different stages at that moment. It's still early on. It's just a few months later. And it's, you know, showing up with all of that, with the vulnerability and the scars and you know, whatever each person forgave to be there and continue to try. It's not necessarily, you know, nothing, it's a process.
We're going to kick it off with the fact that everyone on the stage has known each other for years. You've all been friends for over a decade. And I guess the first question I have is, what made y'all come together for this film? What about the script gravitated y'all? And what did the early stages in the process of creating it look like?
We wrote it, so that made it easy to gravitate to it. I'd worked with Ben on his first film, and I was really surprised and impressed by the film. Ben was already in our theater company, and after that, we really connected and started spending time together with the idea of doing something, creating something together. We thought it was going to be theater. And the more we spent time together, the more sort of our conversation just pivoted to growing up and family and experiences. And we realized we had a lot in common, even though we had different lives. And Daphne, years ago, had tried to pitch to a writer in our theater company, why didn't they write a version of the Cherry Orchard for me, Liza, and Daphne. And I guess that was in the back of my head. And so we came up with like themes, Ben and I, and then asked who I wanted to work with. And there was a short list of people, and these were two of the women on that list. And I told them that story. And so then Ben reached out to them, and we started a creative process of just really specific questions, and from there we just continued to collaborate. They shared stories begrudging. They were like, "Oh, I don't process, okay." And then I think the excitement of having them on board, Ben created a outline, and before you knew it, we were like, "Oh, now we have to write this thing," and it was just an incredible process of bringing real heartfelt and conversations and talking about it, and you getting feedback from each other, and writing and rewriting, and then we presented it to Liza and Daphne, and it went from there with other people in mind for other characters.
Great. I mean, also, Elizabeth, this was your first time producing, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I produced like people in our company have done one-man shows, and I've produced those in a much smaller scale. But yes, first time producing a film.
Was there like any learning curves?
There were so many learning curves.
Can you share a few with us?
There was so many learning curves. There was just so many things, and you know, things dropping and having to constantly pivot. And you know, learn the hard way that like your vision for something wasn't going to work in the location, and so you're like, no, it has to, and then it working out in the locations you end up with. Early on in the film, an actor got COVID the first week, right? Mm-hmm. Mental breakdown, emotional breakdown. Not only did I think that like the chances of it continuing was so small, not to mention I was like, I might have COVID for the next, you know, so like it falling apart. So there was a lot, you know, climbing over and doing whatever needed to happen was just something that I didn't have a problem with at all. But yeah, learned a lot.
Right, absolutely. Do you see yourself wanting to be behind the camera more for future films and shows, or do you see yourself, you love the hybrid of like acting and producing?
Producing, there was a lot of producers. Producing is a lot of things outside of your control. So I don't know. I think writing and directing more than producing. But like with the right producing team, I think, yeah, absolutely. Ask these gorgeous people things.
No, absolutely. Actually, my next question is for Ben. You were quoted saying this film is a love letter to the city. And there's so many transitional scenes that just stuck out to me, like the handball court with the Keith Haring mural, the kids playing on the tree, mentions of the iconic Studio 54. So how did you decide when and where you wanted to include those special nuggets of the city and inject the film with those moments?
Yeah, I said that the full quote was as cliche as it may be. It's kind of been oversaid by every filmmaker who's ever photographed the city. I was thinking of the lead actresses more than anything, and that this city is defined by people and voices and the character and flavor of those people and the communities they come from. We did like a marathon of interviews today on Zoom, and one of the people was asked them like, well, why are you a quintessential New Yorker? It was fine. But I wish I had answered that, because I feel like, you know, I'm from a different vantage point. I'll speak on, and maybe you already know their histories. Most of you know who these people are? Like, and both of them, like, they embody New York in a particular way, whether it's, you know, back to Pajama Party or back to Rent or back to just being a kid in the village or being a club kid or being like 1980s Rocksteady crew and taking hip hop to the world. No, like this stuff means something. And that's not in our movie, but that's like on them. As far as the filming the landscape of New York, that was a big mistake I think we made. An early cut, it felt like bad television. It was just like interior to interior, whatever we could afford, like just enough extras to get by. And we went back and shot all of the, like most of those exteriors. Those were like pickup days, small crew in a van, trying to like make up for what we did wrong.
Wow.
So those are snuck in there. Hopefully they fit. Thank you.
That's amazing. Did you have any favorite spots in mind when you went back and were able to reshoot?
We spent hours trying to find a shot that isn't as good as it was in my head, but this kind of like through the graveyard to the city, life and death. There's a place when you get on the freeway, and I'm like, but where can you put a camera? It's not safe to stop. You know what I'm talking about? Yes, when you're coming from the Bronx to Brooklyn, you pass it, and we like searched for that. That was like kind of the shot I was most obsessed with in that period.
Yeah. No, totally.
And then figuring out the music with that and how long it should be in it in terms of the journey in that car and those pieces was also all really, really thought out. I think at some point we got closer. I just do it like it's like that. We got closer in that shot, so that you can see the cemetery a little, you know, closer in the foreground. Like every bit of that was like nuanced and thought about.
Yeah, it seemed like it too. There were bridge shots and just a lot of beautiful scenery.
A lot of the good stuff is so played out. Like it's like there's things we wanted to do, but it's like I've seen this in every movie already. Yes. What if we get it from Sunnyside, or what if we get it from Sunset Park, or like what's the thing we haven't seen too much already?
Yeah, and that's what gave the film more of an authentic, real New Yorker feel to it for sure. All of the sisters in the film have their own unique personalities and what they bring to the storyline. Ida is the fixer and the savior. Daisy's hyper-independent and self-made. And Serene is like the artistic, excuse me. The artistic, creative performer. Perdón. what was the process of constructing these characters and who they are, and how much of yourselves did you inject into the characters as well?
For me, hi. For me, the process that Elizabeth explained of Ben calling me and initiating conversations and back and forth about specific events in our lives, not exactly in that context, but what the film has is some specific events that I know happened to me or someone else that were very close to home, close to the bone, personal and specific because of that, and emotional. So yeah, there's certain like words that usually another character actually says, not necessarily me, that reflect, a time. Usually it's really the 80s and 90s in New York City, which is a very specific time in New York, looking like us and growing up where we did. That's a very specific story. So it's a lot of fun. Who else gets to tell that story better than we do?
Absolutely.
Like nobody.
Absolutely.
I said that.
I did find a very interesting, which I'm sure real fans know, a piece of information. In the film, Serene looks back at this time in her life where she was a pop star and hooked up with Prince. And in real life, Daphne was actually in a pop group in the late 80s, and it was called Pajama Party.
Yes. In fact, fun fact, my sister-in-law can be seen in that. And we had dinner this Sunday, and she was like, "So tell me about it." So it's a film. Oh, am I in it?
You're like, yes.
I'm like, yeah, you are. Just go see the film. What am I doing? Do I look good?
Beyond the heavier moments that you tapped into to convey the emotional scenes in the film, what was it like to remember Pajama Party? Was the footage in the laptop actual footage from that era? Like,
yes.
What was just that whole experience?
It was a trip.
Yeah, I did do that.
Yeah, it was a trip. In fact, part of that conversation was that, like, it's so sad. There was something very, in looking at it, it reads as just so layered, not just sad, but very layered. And I have to say that. But I think that my sis-in-law, she heard like sad, like, are you apologizing for your past? And which I absolutely do not apologize for anything, but a character that's looking so forlornly at days gone by as if they were golden is very sad to me. So yeah.
And there's a self-esteem element to that too, right? Like,
yes.
When she was younger, when Serene's character was younger, like there's a theme of sexuality between her and her daughter and some of the conflicts that come up. And it just speaks to just womanhood. And even the opening scene of the film, there's topics. Ida's helping a young teen with her sexual health and being safe in the state of reproductive rights in the country today. Like, how did y'all decide which of those themes you wanted to portray in the film as well?
That's interesting. We didn't really decide.
Yeah.
I just think you said it earlier today about the juxtaposition between, say it, what was it you said earlier about like the daughter, mother, and that other story, which wasn't necessarily.
Early on, there was a story. We kind of came to two stories that felt like they could be related within a family. One was someone who wants to adopt, and one who has a teenage daughter who's run away. And there was something interesting in how those could relate to each other.
Right.
I feel like theme is, for me, if you start with theme, it's not a good thing. It's very heavy-handed, and it's something that emerges organically, and kind of you discover it.
We didn't think about necessarily themes other than these sisters, past, what's different today, what's going to trigger, what's changing, what is that going to bring up.
I guess the philosophical stakes are, can a family that has broken apart in so many ways heal? And all of us, however we broke, want a world in which there can be some healing. Yeah. And that's the kind of bigger thing that we hope will resonate.
Yeah. I mean, that was something else I noticed as well. It's just these sisters, you can tell they're close, but there's also just some distance between them. They have their own traumas and their own stories that they work through, sometimes together, sometimes not. And it was interesting to see how y'all highlighted those dynamics through 3 different characters and 3 different storylines. And one that stuck out to me was also Daphne, the scenes where you shot as someone who lost their voice. And you are a vocal coach in the film as well. So your vocal coach asking Serene who hurt you as a diagnosis of that voice loss was so profound. But also just the contentious scenes with Connie, like in the hospital. Any Latina daughter who says the B word to her mother, that hospital's getting lit up. So I guess I want to understand a bit more of the metaphorical insights behind Serene losing her voice, and how you wanted to approach that scene and what you wanted to convey through it.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I have to pull up now. It's kind of, the parts of me that think that I need to have something under control that is absolutely not in my control. We spoke about this earlier, the fact that being a mother and doing the best that you can and feeling like that is really not good enough, that my best isn't good enough. That's a very common experience with humans, and people with daughters specifically. The instance that a woman that does not have a biological baby can pull up and be a mother, and show up and I mean, as far as I think that for Serene, life is out of control, right? And also, I was fascinated with a friend of mine that has spasmodic dysphonia, and to do that specifically would be about the spasmodic dysphonia. So we didn't want to do that, and I credit them for just implying it. But is it neurological? Yes. Is it emotional and propelled by all those other, trauma? Yes, right? So, yeah. And and also happy endings. That is one happy ending, that I do find my voice. People were concerned that there was no real happy ending in the film, and maybe I shouldn't point that out, but it's like, yeah, there is. If there's an attempt to want to be better, I think that's a happy ending.
And speaking on the ending, even though you're not asking, I feel like... No, even though she's not asking.
No, I'm not. I answered the question.
I just wanted to say that, it's a slice of life, right? In this world that came together, and right, all these things happening. And with the passage of time, what you get, we talked about this earlier a little bit, what you get is the beginning of healing. People are healing at different stages at that moment. It's still early on. It's just a few months later. And it's, showing up with all of that, with the vulnerability and the scars and and whatever each person forgave to be there and continue to try. It's not necessarily, nothing. It's a process.
Yeah,
and
it's not a given.
Right.
Right. It's like it could go south. Right. It's just very frail.
When we started, it was just us. It was just like some actors and me, and that's all we had. We didn't have anything. We didn't have a script, but we had these amazing actors. And for me, it was like, okay, I don't know what this is going to be, but I want Daphne to sing. And when she does sing, I want it to be full of meaning. And so, like, can that signify she's shedding something or she's moved through something? And I don't know if it worked. That's up to you to decide. But that was kind of like, how much can it mean when we hear her sing? Mm-hmm.
And how we came up with, then after that, how we figured out to do this music and what that was based on was a whole different thing that happened after the script was done, in terms of it feeling like this aria going in and carrying it with these, this chorus into that room, which I think I personally think it's beautiful, and it wasn't on the page.
So at the end, all the women have this big thing that have happened to them, but they don't share it with each other. So Nina ran away. Daisy does not share it. And Ida marries the nurse coworker, blanking on their name. She doesn't share it either. And then clearly, like, Serene and Connie are working through their issues still. So I guess, what does that say about the relationship dynamic between the three women, and also just maybe how Latina women cope with trauma and conflict as well?
I never personally thought that that all of us didn't know. I think at some point they did, in the way that Ida, is sort of the intermediary and shares stuff about Serene, and I'm sure it doesn't go one way. I'm sure she shares stuff about Daisy to Serene and vice versa. I never thought that by the end people didn't know. Like, I know that by the end, to me, that Daisy's, there's no way that they didn't know that this young woman left. Or that, we obviously all know about the daughter, we don't know about Ida, or I'm not sure she would have told one of us. I don't think it was a conscious decision.
Yeah. It feels like, if I may, that it's not, well, we're, the phrase, you're as sick as your secrets, like they all have these blind spots, these humanities, as, we're used to calling them flaws. And in women, and specifically women that look like us, these life qualities are like fatal flaws, are maybe a mark on the race. Like, why don't we represent better? Where in fact, they're stories that happen to everybody. And like, secrets, like the dirty part, the part that you don't want to really show.
I can't speak for the Latino experience, but I can speak for family dysfunction very well. And I think there comes a time when you realize you're never going to get the apology you need from the person you need it from, and you have a choice. And if you decide to let go of some of that, then you can come to a place of relating and connecting. And I feel like that, for me, that last moment is about that. Like, people have let go of some things.
It's like you said, within the Latin community too, of having kids and representing right, and just that breakdown scene where she's obviously heartbroken, and those, just all the complexities around it.
Yeah, I feel like we all lost a lot in this, and having kids was never something Elizabeth wanted, but I it was very complex, and it was a huge heartache, and the breakdown. It was just complexities behind it. Yeah, you have to, I understand in terms of culturally, like women, Latina women, BIPOC women coming of like, oh, are you fully if you're not a mother, or that kind of pressure. But I think for her, she had this business, something, the relationships, when we talked about her backstory, the relationships never worked out. She never really thought about it. And now that she's in a position to, because of the restaurant, it's her last, way of being able to connect and have something that she loves. And it goes away, that's hers, that she gets to, this thing that happens of like doing it right. And from what everything I've learned and came out of my character. And so that's, I think, was the journey with Daisy, and it falling apart, in the heartache just was left with like, you have you, and, and you can be a nurturing mother-like figure to your niece in the interim while,
Yeah. And the hope that things work out for all the characters keeps us going. All right. That's
Thank you.
Actually our time. Thank you all.